The crimson sun hung low over the horizon as Vivian Greene stood at the edge of Sweetwater, Wyoming Territory, 1878, her future as uncertain as the dust devils that swirled at her feet. She'd traveled 2,000 miles to claim a life that was promised to her, only to find it buried 6 feet under the harsh western soil along with her late uncle. Sweetwater wasn't much to look at, a small settlement carved from wilderness, a clutch of wooden buildings that seemed to be holding their breath against the constant Wyoming wind. Vivian clutched her valise tighter, feeling the stares of the townspeople who had stopped to gawk at the newcomer in her travel-worn but still fashionable Eastern dress. "You must be Vernon Greene's niece," a voice called out. A portly man with a badge pinned to his vest approached, removing his hat in a gesture that seemed both respectful and pitying. "Sheriff Donovan Burke, I'm afraid you've had a wasted journey, Miss Greene." Vivian swallowed hard. "The telegram said he left me his ranch." "That he did, miss," Sheriff Burke nodded, replacing his hat. "But what the telegram couldn't tell you is that the Red Rock Ranch ain't worth the paper the deed is written on, not anymore." "I don't understand. Your uncle made enemies before his passing." "The water rights dispute with the Colton outfit left bad blood. Most folks around here consider the place cursed now." The sheriff frowned, his bushy eyebrows meeting in the middle. "3 men tried to work it after your uncle died. All 3 left within a month, claiming strange happenings. Cattle disappearing, wells going dry overnight, fires starting with no cause." Vivian lifted her chin. She hadn't come all this way to turn back now. "I'd like to see this cursed property for myself, Sheriff." "I can arrange for someone to take you out there tomorrow, but I wouldn't recommend staying. Sweetwater's a growing town. We could use a schoolteacher. I noticed you carry books in your luggage." Vivian smiled tightly. "I appreciate your concern, but I didn't travel across the country to teach school. I came to claim what's mine," the sheriff sighed. "Then you'll want to meet with Hobbs at the land office first thing tomorrow. He's handling your uncle's estate. For now, let me show you to the hotel." As they walked down the dusty main street, Vivian felt the weight of dozens of eyes following her. Sweetwater might have been growing, but a single woman arriving to claim a cursed property was clearly the most interesting thing to happen in some time. The hotel was modest but clean, with faded floral wallpaper and a stern-faced proprietress who introduced herself as Mrs. Jenkins. After settling into her room, Vivian sat on the edge of the narrow bed, unfolding the telegram that had brought her west. Uncle Vernon, a man she'd met only once as a child, had left her his ranch. It was her chance to escape the suffocating future that awaited her in Philadelphia. Marriage to her father's business partner, a man 30 years her senior who wanted a decorative wife to manage his household. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Mrs. Jenkins stood there with a covered tray. "Thought you might be hungry after your journey, Miss Greene." "Thank you, that's very kind." The woman hesitated in the doorway. "Is it true you're claiming the Red Rock Ranch?" "Yes." "Did you know my uncle?" Mrs. Jenkins nodded. "Everyone knew Vernon. He was stubborn as they come, but fair. It's a shame what happened to his place." She lowered her voice. "They say it's cursed now, but I don't hold with such nonsense. It's just people's fear talking." "What happened exactly?" "Vernon found water on his land when others couldn't, made enemies of the Coltons, who run the biggest spread in the county. When he died," she stopped abruptly. "Well, I'm sure Mr. Hobbs will fill you in tomorrow. You get some rest now." After Mrs. Jenkins left, Vivian ate the simple meal of stew and cornbread, mulling over the strange welcome she'd received. One thing was becoming clear. There was more to her uncle's death and this so-called curse than anyone was saying directly. Morning came with brilliant sunshine streaming through her window. After dressing in her most practical outfit, a navy blue traveling suit with a sensible skirt, Vivian made her way to the land office. Mr. Hobbs was a thin man with ink-stained fingers and spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. "Miss Greene, I have the papers right here for the transfer of deed." He shuffled through a stack of documents. "But I feel obligated to inform you that the property has difficulties." "The curse, you mean?" Vivian asked dryly. Hobbs blinked rapidly. "I wouldn't use such superstitious language, but yes, there have been incidents." The previous attempts to work the land after your uncle's passing were unsuccessful. What exactly happened to my uncle, Mr. Hobbs? No one seems willing to speak plainly about it. The man looked uncomfortable. It was ruled an accident. He fell from a ridge while checking his property lines, but he lowered his voice. Some say he was pushed. There was a dispute with the Colton ranch over water rights. Your uncle found a natural spring on his property, and in these parts, water is more valuable than gold, and the Coltons wanted it. They claimed the water source fed their stream as well. It got ugly. Then after Vernon died, strange things began happening at Red Rock. Cattle vanished. The spring would run dry, then flow again. Fires broke out with no explanation. Hobbs adjusted his spectacles nervously. I must advise you, Miss Greene, selling the property might be your wisest course. Who would buy a cursed ranch? Vivian asked. Josiah Colton has expressed interest. He's offered a fair price considering the circumstances. Vivian's jaw tightened. I see, and if this Colton gets his hands on my uncle's land, will the curse mysteriously disappear? Hobbs had the grace to look embarrassed. I couldn't say, Miss Greene. Then I'll sign those transfer papers, Mr. Hobbs. To my name, not Josiah Colton's. By midday, Vivian was legally the owner of Red Rock Ranch, and Sheriff Burke had reluctantly arranged for someone to take her to see her property. She waited outside the general store, having purchased a few necessities with her dwindling funds. A shadow fell across her path, and she looked up to see a tall man with the sun at his back. He wore the dust of the trail like a second skin, his clothes faded from sun and wear. A cowboy's hat sat low over his eyes, and the gun at his hip looked like it had seen use. As he stepped forward, she could see his features. A strong jawline shadowed with stubble, eyes the color of faded denim, and a scar that cut across his left cheek. You the woman claiming Red Rock. His voice was low, rough from disuse or trail dust. I am Vivian Greene, yes, and you are Logan Thorne. Sheriff asked me to take you out to your property. There was something in the way he said your property that sounded like a challenge. You don't think it's mine. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Lady, that land belongs to whoever can hold it. Vernon couldn't in the end, and he knew it better than anyone. Did you know my uncle worked for him for a time? Logan Thorne adjusted his hat slightly until things got complicated. You left because of the curse? She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. I left because dead men don't pay wages, Miss Greene. He nodded toward the livery. My horses are ready if you are. Vivian followed him, bristling at his dismissive tone. He'd saddled 2 horses, a sturdy bay mare for her and a tall, muscled stallion for himself. He secured her valise and the packages from the general store, then helped her mount with hands that were impersonal but strong. They rode in silence for the first mile, leaving the town behind. The Wyoming landscape opened before them vast, rolling plains giving way to rocky outcroppings and distant mountains whose peaks were still capped with snow even in early summer. How far is the ranch? Vivian finally asked. About 10 miles. We'll be there before sunset. Logan Thorne kept his eyes on the horizon. You planning to stay out there alone? That's my business, Mr. Thorne. He glanced at her then, something like amusement in his eyes. Out here, surviving is everybody's business, Miss Greene. A woman alone on a ranch that's seen nothing but trouble that's asking for more of the same. I'm not afraid of hard work. It ain't the work that'll kill you. He fell silent again, focusing on the trail. As they rode, Vivian studied her companion surreptitiously. Logan Thorne moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to the saddle, his body in perfect harmony with his horse. There was a wariness about him, too, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, how his hand never strayed far from his weapon. This was a man who expected trouble and was ready for it. You said you worked for my uncle, she ventured after another mile. What did you do? Bit of everything. Ranch hand mostly. Your uncle wasn't one for having many people around, but you got along with him. Logan's expression softened slightly. Vernon was a fair man, stubborn as hell but fair. He loved that land, enough to die for it. Logan reined his horse to a stop, turning in the saddle to face her fully. What are you asking, Miss Greene? Mr. Hobbs at the land office implied my uncle's death might not have been an accident. His jaw tightened. Folk in Sweetwater talk too much and say too little. He nudged his horse forward again. Vernon knew that land was worth fighting for. The water source alone made it valuable. But he crossed the wrong people. The Coltons. Logan nodded. Josiah Colton owns half the county and wants the rest. When Vernon found that spring, it changed everything. Suddenly, his worthless piece of range was the most valuable property around. And after he died, people started saying it was cursed. Convenient, isn't it? Logan's voice carried an edge. Land no one will touch is easy to pick up cheap. Vivian considered this. Did you see any of these curse-related incidents yourself? He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. I saw enough to know something wasn't right. Cattle disappearing isn't unusual. Rustlers are common enough, but healthy stock dropping dead overnight, wells that were flowing one day and bone dry the next. And fires that start when there's no one around for miles. He shook his head. I don't believe in curses, Miss Greene, but I know when something doesn't add up. Why are you helping me then? If you think the ranch is trouble, I owed Vernon, and the sheriff offered good money. He glanced at her. But my advice, see the place, then sell it to the highest bidder and get back on the eastbound train. Vivian bristled. I didn't come all this way to turn and run, Mr. Thorne. No, he said, his gaze assessing her with new interest. I don't suppose you did. They crested a rise, and suddenly the landscape opened before them. A valley stretched out, bordered by red rock formations that glowed in the afternoon light. A creek wound through the center, beside which sat a modest ranch house, a barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the valley floor, though fewer than would be expected on a working ranch. Red rock, Logan announced unnecessarily. Vivian felt a strange tightening in her chest. This land, her land now, was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. Nothing like the manicured parks and gardens of Philadelphia. As they approached the ranch house, Vivian noticed signs of neglect, broken fence posts, a shuttered window hanging askew, weeds growing up around the porch steps. But the structure itself was solid, built of thick logs and stone. Logan dismounted in one fluid motion, then helped her down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and their eyes met briefly before he stepped back. It needs work, she said, trying to sound practical rather than overwhelmed. Everything out here needs work, Miss Greene. That's the nature of the West. He led the horses to a water trough. I'll get these two settled, then show you around before I head back to town. You're leaving? Vivian couldn't keep the alarm from her voice. Logan looked at her, his expression unreadable. Sheriff paid me to bring you out here, not to stay. I'll pay you to stay, she said impulsively. At least for a few days. I need to understand what I'm facing if I'm going to make this work. And if I tell you it can't work, then I'll need to know why. She met his gaze steadily. I can pay a fair wage. He studied her for a long moment. 2 days, I'll show you the property, help you understand what you're up against. Then you decide what to do next. Relief flooded her. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Logan, he corrected. If we're working together, might as well use my name. Inside, the ranch house was simple but surprisingly comfortable. A large main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. 2 smaller rooms branched off a bedroom that had clearly been her uncle's, and a storage room with a small cot that appeared to be for hired help. Your uncle wasn't one for fancy living, Logan commented as Vivian took in her new home, but he built solid. Vivian ran her hand along the smooth surface of a hand-crafted table. Did he build this place himself? Most of it. He came out here 15 years ago with nothing but determination and a bad case of gold fever. When that didn't pan out, he turned to ranching instead. And found water where others couldn't, Logan nodded. Changed everything for him. Land that was barely worth the taxes suddenly had potential. He moved to the fireplace, kneeling to build a fire. Nights get cold out here, even in summer. As twilight deepened outside, they settled into an unexpected domestic routine. Logan brought in firewood and checked the perimeter of the house while Vivian unpacked the supplies she'd purchased in town. They prepared a simple meal together, eating by lamplight at her uncle's table. Tomorrow I'll show you the spring, Logan said as they finished eating. It's what all the trouble is about, might as well see it for yourself. You think the Coltons are behind the strange happenings, Vivian stated rather than asked. I think someone's mighty interested in making sure no one succeeds here. Logan's eyes were shadowed in the lamplight. Whether it's the Coltons or someone else is the question. You said you left after my uncle died. Where did you go? He hesitated, something shifting in his expression. Drifted, took work where I could find it. Vivian sensed there was more to his story but didn't press. And now the sheriff knew exactly where to find you when he needed someone to bring me out here. A smile touched the corner of his mouth. Burke and I have an understanding. I stay out of trouble in his town and he pretends not to know about my past. What past would that be, Mr. Thorne? She asked, suddenly wary. Nothing that would endanger you, Miss Greene. He stood, gathering their plates. You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. That night, lying in her uncle's bed, Vivian listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the Wyoming night, the distant howl of coyotes, the soft creak of the house settling, the occasional snort from the horses in the barn. Logan had insisted on sleeping in the bunkhouse despite her offer of the small cot in the storage room, saying it was more proper that way, proper or not. Vivian found herself thinking about Logan Thorne as sleep eluded her. There was something compelling about the man beyond his obvious physical attributes. He carried secrets, that much was clear, but there was also an integrity to him that she found herself trusting despite her better judgment. Morning came early on the ranch. Vivian woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of movement in the main room. She dressed quickly in her simplest skirt and shirtwaist, pinning her dark hair up in a practical knot. Logan was at the stove when she emerged, looking as if he'd already been awake for hours. His hat hung on a peg by the door, giving her her first clear view of his face without shadows. In the morning light, the scar on his cheek was less prominent than she'd first thought, a thin white line that did nothing to detract from his handsome features. "Hope you don't mind," he said, nodding toward the stove. "Figured we could use a hot breakfast before riding out." "Not at all." Vivian moved to help him, setting the table with her uncle's mismatched dishes. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Thorne. I wouldn't have taken you for a cook." "Man learns to fend for himself out here." He slid a plate of flapjacks and bacon toward her. "Eat up. We've got ground to cover." They rode out after breakfast, Logan leading her on a circuit of the property. Red Rock Ranch encompassed nearly 500 acres, though much of it was rocky terrain unsuitable for grazing. The prize, as Logan explained, was the natural spring that fed into a year-round creek crossing the eastern portion of the land. "This is what they're after," Logan said as they dismounted by the spring. Clear water bubbled from a crack in the red rocks, forming a pool before flowing downhill. In dry years, this keeps flowing when other water sources dry up. Vivian knelt beside the spring, trailing her fingers through the cool water. "It's beautiful. It's life," Logan corrected. "Out here, water like this means the difference between success and failure." He pointed to the southeast. "The Colton property lies that way." "They claim this spring feeds their creek. Does it? Possibly. Water follows its own path underground," he shrugged. "But by law, this spring is on Red Rock land, which makes it yours." "And worth killing for?" Vivian asked quietly. Logan's expression darkened. "I'm not saying Vernon was murdered, but his accident was mighty convenient for some." They continued their tour, Logan pointing out boundaries and landmarks. By midday, they'd covered only half the property, stopping to rest the horses in a grove of cottonwoods beside the creek. "Your uncle ran about 200 head of cattle," Logan explained as they shared a simple lunch of bread and jerky. "After he died, most were sold off. What's left is about 50 head, enough to keep the ranch claim valid but not much of a working operation." "How many would I need to make this place profitable?" Logan gave her a long look. "You're really considering staying?" "I am." Vivian met his gaze steadily. "This land is all I have now. I won't be driven off by superstition or intimidation. It'll take more than determination, Miss Greene." "You need capital, help, and time, assuming the curse doesn't run you off first. Then I'll need to understand exactly what I'm up against." She brushed crumbs from her skirt. Tell me about these incidents, all of them. Logan sighed, leaning back against a tree trunk. After Vernon died, I stayed on for about a month. The first strange thing was the cattle. 8 head vanished overnight, no tracks, no sign of rustlers, just gone. Then the spring ran dry for 3 days, only to start flowing again as suddenly as it had stopped. Could there be a natural explanation? Maybe, but then came the fires. Small ones at first, a haystack, a section of fence. Then one night the bunkhouse caught fire while I was in town. By the time I got back, it was ash. His jaw tightened. After that, I figured it was time to move on. And the others who tried to work the ranch after you, similar stories. Animals dying or disappearing, water problems, unexplained accidents. Nobody stayed longer than a few weeks. He fixed her with a serious look. I don't believe in supernatural curses, Miss Greene, but I do believe someone wants this land bad enough to create the illusion of one. The Coltons. They're the obvious suspects. Josiah Colton has 3 sons, all cut from the same ruthless cloth, but proving it is another matter. Vivian considered this information. If I stay and fight, I'll need allies. You'll need more than allies, you'll need proof. Logan stood, offering his hand to help her up. Come on, there's something else you should see. They rode to the northern edge of the property, where the land rose sharply into rocky bluffs. Logan led her up a narrow trail to a ridge overlooking the entire valley. Your uncle fell from somewhere along here, he said quietly. They found his body at the bottom. Vivian felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. You think he was pushed? I think it's awfully convenient that the man standing between the Coltons and this water source had a fatal accident. Logan's eyes scanned the horizon, but I've got no proof, and neither did Sheriff Burke. Not that he looked too hard. The Coltons have influence in these parts. As they stood there, Vivian noticed riders in the distance, 3 men on horseback approaching from the southeast from the direction of the Colton ranch. We have company, she said, nodding toward the riders. Logan's posture changed instantly, his hand moving to rest on his gun. Let's head back down, better to meet them on level ground. They descended quickly and mounted their horses, riding back toward the ranch house. The 3 riders adjusted their course to intercept them, and soon Vivian could make out details: 3 men, well-mounted and well-armed. Stay behind me, Logan murmured as they stopped to wait for the approaching riders. Let me do the talking. The lead rider was a man in his 50s, his face weathered by sun and hard living, but his clothes and horse spoke of wealth. The 2 younger men flanking him were clearly his sons, their family resemblance unmistakable in their sharp eyes and set jaws. Thorne, the older man acknowledged with a curt nod. Heard you were back in these parts. His gaze shifted to Vivian, and you must be Vernon's niece. Vivian Greene, she confirmed, refusing to be intimidated, and you would be Mr. Colton, I presume. Josiah Colton. He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. These are my sons, Ethan and Samuel. He looked around the property with a proprietary air. I was sorry to hear about your uncle's passing. Terrible accident. Was it? Vivian asked, keeping her voice level. Josiah Colton's eyes hardened. Dangerous country for those who don't know its ways, Miss Greene. Easy to make fatal mistakes. I'll keep that in mind. I understand Hobbs told you about my offer for this property. Colton leaned forward in his saddle. It's still open, more than fair considering the difficulties this place has seen. You mean the curse, Vivian said dryly. One of the sons, Ethan, she thought, smirked. Call it what you will. Fact is, nobody's had luck here since your uncle died. Perhaps luck is about to change, Vivian replied. Josiah Colton's false smile disappeared. I'd reconsider if I were you, Miss Greene. This land has caused nothing but grief. Why not take the money and return east? This is no place for a woman alone. She's not alone. Logan's voice was quiet but carried a clear warning. Colton's eyes narrowed as he studied Logan. For now, perhaps. But hired guns come and go, don't they, Thorne? He turned back to Vivian. My offer stands for 1 week. After that, well, he shrugged. Let's just say the price of cursed land tends to fall rather than rise. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Colton, but Red Rock Ranch is not for sale. Josiah Colton's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake, Miss Greene, one you'll regret. He reined his horse around. Good day to you. As the Coltons rode away, Vivian released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well, that was illuminating. It was a warning, Logan said grimly. And not a subtle one. He as good as admitted they're behind the curse. Admitting and proving are different things. Logan watched the retreating riders. And now they know you've got help, which means they'll be more careful or more desperate. They rode back to the ranch house in thoughtful silence. As they unsaddled the horses, Vivian tried to process everything she'd learned. She was up against a powerful family determined to drive her away, with no allies except a drifting cowboy who'd already made it clear he'd only stay for 2 days. "What happened between you and the Coltons?" she asked as they finished with the horses. There seemed to be history there. Logan's hands stilled on the saddle he was hanging up. "We've had our differences." "That's not an answer," he sighed, turning to face her. "After your uncle died and the strange happenings started, I did some asking around. Got too close to something the Coltons wanted kept quiet. Josiah's oldest son, Benjamin, took exception to my questions." "What happened?" "Let's just say we exchanged more than words, and I wasn't welcome in Sweetwater for a while after." His hand unconsciously touched the scar on his cheek. "Is that how you got that?" Logan nodded. "Benjamin Colton's handiwork. He favors a knife in a fight." "Yet you came back when the sheriff asked." "Like I said, Burke and I have an understanding." That evening they sat on the porch as the sun set, the sky ablaze with colors that seemed to set the red rocks on fire. Vivian had cooked this time a simple stew with the last of the supplies they'd brought from town. "Tomorrow's my last day," Logan reminded her. "You need to decide what you're going to do." Vivian watched the darkening landscape, the strange beauty of it seeping into her bones. "I'm staying." "Even knowing what you're up against, especially knowing." She turned to look at him. "My whole life I've had decisions made for me, what to wear, who to marry, how to behave. Coming west was the first real choice I ever made for myself." She gestured to the land spreading out before them. "This is mine, I won't be frightened away from it." Logan studied her face in the fading light. "You'll need help, allies in town, someone to work the ranch with you. Are you offering?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He looked away. "I'm not the staying kind, Miss Greene." "Why not?" When he didn't answer, she pressed on. "What are you running from, Logan? Who says I'm running? A man who doesn't put down roots is either running from something or towards something." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Maybe both," he finally said. "I had a family once. A small ranch in Colorado, lost them to fever 5 years ago. I'm sorry," he shrugged, but she could see the effort it cost him to appear casual. "Been drifting since. Seems easier than trying to build something just to lose it again." "Yet you worked for my uncle." "Vernon was persuasive, and I never planned to stay long." He looked at her directly. "If you're determined to make a stand here, you need to be prepared for what might come. The Coltons won't give up easily." "Then I'll need to be smarter than they are," Vivian said, determination hardening within her. "Tomorrow we'll go to town. I need supplies, information, and maybe a few more hands willing to work for a cursed ranch." Logan's mouth quirked up at one corner. "You're something else, Vivian Greene." "Is that a compliment, Mr. Thorne?" "It might be." He stood, stretching his tall frame. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be interesting." Morning brought a clear sky and a sense of purpose. They rode to Sweetwater together, Vivian with a list of supplies and Logan with a watchful eye for trouble. The town looked different to Vivian, now not just a stop on her journey, but a community she would need to navigate if she was to succeed at Red Rock. Their first stop was the general store, where Vivian ordered enough supplies to last several weeks, surprising the proprietor with her efficiency and knowledge of what a working ranch would require. "You seem to know your business, Miss Greene," the shopkeeper commented as he tallied her purchases. "I grew up helping my father with his accounts," Vivian explained. "Numbers have always made sense to me." "Well, it's refreshing to see someone taking a practical approach to that ranch. Shame about all the troubles out there." "Yes, quite a coincidence how those troubles started after the Coltons expressed interest in the property," Vivian remarked innocently. The shopkeeper's eyes widened, and he glanced around nervously before leaning forward. "Best not to speak too loudly about such things, Miss Greene. The Coltons have ears everywhere. and friends in convenient positions, I imagine. They've been in this valley for 30 years, built the largest spread in the county. People respect that kind of success, even when it comes at others' expense, Vivian pressed. The man straightened, his expression closing. Your supplies will be ready in an hour, Miss Greene. Will there be anything else? Logan, who had been examining a display of tools nearby, stepped forward. We'll be back for those supplies. Miss Greene has other business in town. Outside, he guided her toward the saloon. You're making waves already, he commented. Good. People have been too comfortable with the Colton's version of events. Just be careful. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. The saloon was relatively quiet at this hour, with only a few early drinkers scattered at tables. The bartender, a burly man with an impressive mustache, nodded to Logan in recognition. Thorne, didn't expect to see you back so soon. Passing through, Hayes. Logan leaned against the bar. Miss Greene here is taking over Vernon's place. Hayes raised his eyebrows, looking Vivian over with new interest. Is she now, brave woman? I hear you're the man who knows everyone's business in Sweetwater, Vivian said directly. A smile creased Hayes's weathered face. Occupational hazard, madam. Then perhaps you can tell me who in town might be willing to work for a supposedly cursed ranch. Hayes wiped the bar thoughtfully. Most locals steer clear of Red Rock these days, but there are always new folks passing through looking for work. He glanced at Logan. Though from what I hear, you've already got the best hand in the territory. Logan shook his head. I'm just helping Miss Greene get settled. Shame, you two together might actually have a chance against the Colton outfit. Hayes lowered his voice. Word is they're getting desperate about that water. Drought's been bad this year and their southern pastures are drying up. Making Red Rock Spring even more valuable, Vivian concluded. Exactly. Hayes poured 3 glasses of whiskey, sliding one each to Logan and Vivian. On the house. Consider it a welcome to Sweetwater, Miss Greene. God knows you'll need the fortification. As they sipped their drinks, a commotion outside drew their attention. Raised voices, then the sound of horses arriving at speed. Logan moved to the window, his posture tensing. Colton's, he said grimly. All 3 sons. Before Vivian could respond, the saloon doors burst open, and 3 men strode in. She recognized Ethan and Samuel from yesterday, accompanied by a 3rd man who could only be Benjamin, the eldest. He was taller than his brothers, with cold eyes and a cruel twist to his mouth. All conversation in the saloon died as they entered. Benjamin's gaze locked onto Logan immediately, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, look who's back, the drifter with more questions than sense. Logan turned slowly to face him, his stance casual but alert. Benjamin. Still hiding behind your family name, I see. The eldest Colton's smile vanished. You've got nerve coming back to Sweetwater, Thorne, free country. Benjamin's eyes flicked to Vivian, then back to Logan. Heard you're working for Greene's niece now, glutton for punishment. Just helping a neighbor. Benjamin laughed, the sound without humor. Neighbor, that's rich. He stepped closer. That land's been promised to my family, Thorne. Old Vernon knew it before his accident, and his niece will learn it too. Vivian stepped forward. Mr. Colton, if you have a legitimate claim to my uncle's land, I suggest you take it up with the proper authorities. Benjamin turned his cold gaze on her. Look at that. The Eastern lady thinks she understands how things work out here. He moved toward her, stopping when Logan subtly shifted to block his path. Miss Greene, let me be clear. That land will be Colton land one way or another. The only question is how painful the process will be for you. Is that a threat, Mr. Colton? Vivian asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Call it friendly advice. He turned back to Logan. As for you, Thorne, I suggest you ride out while you still can. Our last conversation didn't end well for you. Logan's hand rested near his gun. I seem to recall you needed both your brothers to make that conversation go your way. The tension in the room ratcheted higher. Benjamin's hand twitched toward his own weapon, but Hayes's voice cut through the silence. Take it outside, gentlemen. I just had this floor cleaned. For a moment, it seemed Benjamin might ignore the warning. Then he stepped back, a cold smile returning to his face. Another time, Thorne, when you don't have an audience. His gaze shifted to Vivian. 1 week, Miss Greene, then our father's offer expires along with our patience. The Colton brothers backed out of the saloon, the doors swinging shut behind them. The room collectively exhaled, conversations slowly resuming. Hayes wiped his brow with a handkerchief. Well, that was bracing. You two sure know how to liven up a Tuesday morning. Vivian's hands were shaking slightly as she set down her glass. They're not even trying to hide their intentions anymore. They don't need to, Logan said grimly. The Coltons own half the county and intimidate the rest. Few would stand against them. Then we need those who will. Vivian straightened her shoulders. Mr. Hayes, about those workers you mentioned, where might I find them? By early afternoon, Vivian had hired 2 men, a grizzled former buffalo hunter named Cooper who claimed to be too mean to fear curses, and a young Mexican vaquero called Miguel who needed work badly enough to risk supernatural retribution. Neither was ideal, but they were a start. As they prepared to leave town with their supplies and new hands, Sheriff Burke intercepted them outside the livery. Heard about your run-in with the Colton boys, he said without preamble. Also heard you're hiring help for Red Rock. News travels fast, Vivian remarked. Small town. Burke's gaze moved to Logan. Thought you were just escorting Miss Greene to her property, Thorne, not setting up for a range war. Just helping her get established, Sheriff, Logan replied evenly. Burke looked unconvinced. Miss Greene, I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. The Coltons are not men to be trifled with. Neither am I a woman to be intimidated, Sheriff. Vivian met his gaze steadily. If the Coltons have legitimate business with me, they can approach me legally. If they choose other methods, I expect the law to protect me as it would any citizen. The sheriff sighed heavily. I'll do what I can, Miss Greene, but my jurisdiction only stretches so far. Out at Red Rock, you're largely on your own. I understand. Vivian nodded toward Cooper and Miguel, who were loading supplies nearby. That's why I'm taking precautions. Those 2 against the Colton outfit? Burke shook his head. You'll need more than that. She has more, Logan said quietly. Both Vivian and the sheriff looked at him in surprise. I thought you were leaving tomorrow, Vivian said. Logan's eyes met hers. Plans change. The ride back to Red Rock was tense but uneventful. Cooper and Miguel followed with a wagon of supplies while Vivian tried to process this unexpected development. You don't have to stay, she told Logan as they rode side by side. I know this isn't what you signed on for. Let's just say I have my own reasons for wanting to see the Coltons put in their place. He glanced at her. Besides, someone needs to teach you how to handle a firearm if you're staying out here. What makes you think I don't know how to shoot? Logan raised an eyebrow. Do you? No, Vivian admitted with a small smile, but I'm a quick study. That night, after Cooper and Miguel had settled into the repaired bunkhouse, Vivian and Logan sat by the fire in the main house, planning their next steps. First priority is securing the water source, Logan said, sketching a rough map of the property on a piece of paper. If the spring is what they're after, that's where they'll focus their efforts. We should set up regular patrols, Vivian suggested. Between the 4 of us, we can keep eyes on most of the property during daylight hours. Nights will be the problem. That's when most of the curse incidents happened. They worked late into the evening, developing strategies and contingency plans. As the fire burned low, Vivian found herself studying Logan's profile in the flickering light. He was so different from the men she'd known in Philadelphia, direct, unpolished, capable in ways that mattered out here. Why did you really decide to stay? She asked softly. Logan looked up from the map, his expression unreadable. Like I said, I have history with the Coltons. It's more than that. He was quiet for a moment. Your uncle gave me a chance when others wouldn't, said he didn't care about a man's past, only what he did today. He set down his pencil. I owe him, and I guess I'm curious to see if his niece has the same backbone he did. And if I do, a smile touched his lips, then Red Rock might just have a fighting chance. The next days fell into a rhythm. Mornings brought work around the ranch, repairing fences, tending to the remaining cattle, reinforcing buildings that had fallen into disrepair. Afternoons were often spent patrolling the property boundaries, watching for signs of intrusion. In the evenings, Logan taught Vivian to shoot, her natural precision making her a quick study with both rifle and revolver. Cooper proved to be a valuable addition, his years as a hunter giving him an almost supernatural awareness of the land. Miguel's skill with horses and cattle made the daily ranch work proceed more efficiently than Vivian had dared hope. And Logan was the linchpin that held it all together, directing their efforts with the quiet authority of someone who had run a ranch before. 5 days after their confrontation in the saloon, the first incident occurred. Miguel found 3 head of cattle dead near the western boundary, no marks on them, no obvious cause. Poison, most likely, Logan said after examining the carcasses. Someone tampered with this section of the stream. The Coltons wouldn't poison their own water source, Vivian objected. They would if they were trying to convince you the land is cursed, or if they were planning to take control of the property soon anyway. Logan's expression was grim. They're escalating. 2 days left on their offer, and they want to make sure you understand what refusing means. That night, they doubled the watches. Vivian insisted on taking a shift despite Logan's objections. "I won't ask others to do what I won't do myself," she said firmly, checking the rifle he had taught her to use. "Stubbornness must run in your family," he muttered, but there was a hint of admiration in his voice. Vivian's watch came in the quiet hours before dawn. She patrolled the area near the spring, the moon bright enough to illuminate the landscape in silvery light. The vastness of the Wyoming night struck her anew, so different from the close, crowded streets of Philadelphia. Out here, a person could breathe, could expand to fill the space around them. A sound caught her attention, a subtle shift in the night's rhythm. She froze, listening intently. There it was again, the soft crunch of a footstep on rocky ground. Someone was approaching the spring from the east. Vivian moved quietly into the shadow of a large boulder, her rifle ready. A figure emerged from the darkness, a man moving with deliberate care. In the moonlight, she recognized the distinctive hat and broad shoulders of Ethan Colton. He carried something in his hands, a sack of some sort. As he reached the spring, he knelt beside it, opening the sack and preparing to empty its contents into the water. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Vivian called out, stepping from her hiding place with the rifle aimed steadily. Ethan Colton froze, then slowly turned. Well. "The Eastern lady has teeth." His hand moved toward his gun. "Touch that weapon and I'll shoot," Vivian said, her voice remarkably calm. "What's in the sack, Mr. Colton?" "Just some feed for the wildlife," he replied with a smirk. "Step away from the spring. Or what? You'll shoot me." "Do you have any idea what that would bring down on you?" "I know exactly what poisoning my water source would bring down on you," Vivian countered. "Attempted murder carries a serious penalty even in Wyoming Territory." Uncertainty flashed across Ethan's face. "You've got no proof of anything." "I have you on my property in the middle of the night with a mysterious substance you were about to pour into my spring." Vivian kept the rifle steady. "I think that's proof enough for Sheriff Burke to ask some uncomfortable questions." For a moment, they stood in tense silence. Then another voice cut through the darkness. "She's not alone, Colton." Logan emerged from the shadows, his gun drawn. Ethan's eyes darted between them, calculating his options. "Seems like we have a standoff," he said finally. "Not exactly," Logan replied. "Cooper's got a rifle trained on you from that ridge. One wrong move and you won't make it back to your daddy's ranch." As if to confirm Logan's words, moonlight glinted off a rifle barrel on the ridge above them. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This isn't over." "Leave the sack," Vivian ordered. "Then get off my land." After a moment's hesitation, Ethan set down the sack and backed away slowly. "You've made a mistake, both of you. My father's offer expires tomorrow. After that, there are no more friendly negotiations." "There was nothing friendly about poison," Vivian replied. When Ethan had disappeared into the darkness, Logan approached the sack cautiously, examining its contents without touching them. "Copper sulfate," he said grimly. "Enough to poison the spring for weeks, would have killed any animal or person who drank from it." Vivian's hands trembled slightly as she lowered the rifle. "They're really trying to kill us." "They're trying to scare you into selling," Logan corrected, "but they wouldn't shed tears if accidents happened along the way." He looked at her with new respect. You handled that well. I was terrified, she admitted. Couldn't tell. A smile touched his lips. Vernon would be proud. The next morning, they brought the sack of poison to Sheriff Burke, who received their complaint with obvious discomfort. It's your word against Ethan Colton's, he said after examining the evidence. And in case you haven't noticed, the Coltons carry more weight around here than newcomers. So you'll do nothing? Vivian asked incredulously. I didn't say that. Burke sighed heavily. I'll have a word with Josiah, warn him to rein in his boys, but without more proof, my hands are tied legally. And if they try again, Logan asked. Next time it might not be just the water they target. The sheriff met Logan's gaze directly. Then I suggest you all be very careful. Accidents happen out in those hills, hard to prove otherwise even when everyone knows the truth. As they left the sheriff's office, Vivian's frustration boiled over. So the law just turns a blind eye when the wealthy and connected break it. Welcome to the West, Logan said grimly. Out here, justice often comes from a gun barrel, not a gavel. That's not the world I want to live in. Then maybe you should reconsider the Colton's offer. Logan's voice was gentle but firm. Today's the deadline. You could take the money, return east, build a life without looking over your shoulder. Vivian stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Is that what you think I should do? Run away? I think you should understand exactly what you're up against. His eyes held hers. The Coltons won't stop. This will get worse before it gets better if it ever does. And you, will you stay and fight with me, or are you recommending I surrender while you ride on to the next town? Something flickered in his expression. I told you I'd stay. For how long? Until the next crisis. Until you decide the risk isn't worth it. Vivian stepped closer. I need to know if you're with me, Logan, not just for now, but for whatever comes. The busy street around them seemed to fade away as Logan searched her face. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking for honesty. For commitment. A muscle worked in his jaw. I haven't committed to anything or anyone since I buried my wife and son. I'm not asking you to replace them, Vivian said softly. I'm asking you to find a reason to stop running. Before he could respond, a commotion down the street caught their attention. Josiah Colton and his 3 sons had emerged from the bank, headed in their direction. The older man's face darkened when he spotted them. Miss Greene, Josiah called out, approaching with his sons flanking him. Fortunate timing. I was just about to send a rider to Red Rock to deliver more wildlife feed, Vivian asked coldly. Josiah's eyes narrowed slightly, then he forced a smile. I understand there may have been a misunderstanding last night. Young men can be overzealous. Attempted poisoning seems beyond overzealous, Mr. Colton. Allegations without proof are dangerous, Miss Greene. Josiah's friendly facade slipped momentarily, but I didn't approach you to quarrel. Today is the deadline for my offer. I have the bank draft right here. He patted his breast pocket. $15,000 for Red Rock Ranch, a more than generous sum considering its troubled history. $15,000 was indeed a fortune, more than enough to establish herself comfortably anywhere in the country. For a moment, Vivian allowed herself to imagine taking the money, leaving behind the danger and uncertainty of Red Rock. Then she thought of her uncle, who had found something worth fighting for in this wild country. She thought of the spring bubbling from red rocks, of the vast skies and the sense of possibility she felt every morning on the ranch. And she thought of Logan, who had lost everything once and was still afraid to believe he might find something worth staying for. Red Rock is not for sale, Mr. Colton, she said clearly. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Josiah's expression hardened. You're making a grave mistake, Miss Greene. The only mistake would be surrendering to threats and intimidation. Benjamin Colton stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun. Pretty words won't protect you out at that cursed ranch. No, Logan said, moving slightly to place himself between Vivian and the Coltons. But I will. Benjamin's lip curled. The drifter fancies himself a knight in dusty armor. How touching. I'm just a man who recognizes bullies when I see them, Logan replied evenly. You're a dead man, Thorne, Benjamin snarled. You and anyone foolish enough to stand with you. Enough, Josiah Colton said sharply. This is neither the time nor place. He fixed Vivian with a cold stare. You've made your choice, Miss Greene. What follows is on your head. He turned to his sons. Come, we have business elsewhere. As the Coltons departed, Vivian released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They'll come for us now. Logan nodded grimly. Tonight, most likely, we need to prepare. They spent the rest of the day making preparations, purchasing additional ammunition and supplies before heading back to Red Rock. Logan outlined a defensive strategy, positioning Cooper and Miguel at key points around the ranch while he and Vivian guarded the main house and spring. As darkness fell, a strange calm settled over Vivian. She had made her choice, for better or worse. Now she would face the consequences. You're quiet, Logan observed as they shared a simple dinner. Just thinking about choices. She looked up at him. We never finished our conversation from town. Logan set down his fork. About stopping running. Yes, he was silent for a moment. When my family died, something in me died too, the part that believed in building, in tomorrow. His voice was low, almost a whisper. For 5 years, I've drifted, taking odd jobs, moving on before I could care too much about any place or person. And now I find myself caring what happens to a stubborn woman and a piece of land that reminds me too much of what I lost. His eyes met hers. It terrifies me. Vivian reached across the table, her hand covering his. We're all afraid, Logan. The question is whether we let fear make our choices for us. Before he could respond, Cooper burst through the door. Riders coming, at least 6, maybe more. Logan was on his feet immediately. Positions, everyone, you know what to do. The next hour was a blur of tension and preparation. Lights were extinguished, positions taken, weapons readied. Vivian's heart pounded in her chest as she crouched near a window, rifle ready, watching the darkness for movement. The attack, when it came, was coordinated and vicious. Torches flew through the night, landing on the bunkhouse roof. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Logan, who had positioned himself near Vivian, returned fire with deadly precision. Stay low, he ordered as bullets splintered the window frame above them. Across the yard, Miguel was providing covering fire while Cooper attempted to douse the flames that had caught on the bunkhouse roof. The attackers, at least 8 men by Vivian's count, were pressing their advantage, moving closer to the main house. A crash from the back of the house told her someone had broken in. Logan heard it too, spinning toward the sound. Kitchen door, he said grimly. Stay here. No, Vivian rose to a crouch, rifle ready. We stay together. They moved through the darkened house toward the kitchen, where shadows moved in the dim moonlight filtering through the windows. 2 men had entered, guns drawn. Logan fired first, hitting one in the shoulder. The man cried out, dropping his weapon. The second intruder returned fire, forcing Logan and Vivian to take cover behind the heavy oak table. Outside, the gunfire intensified. A shout of pain that sounded like Miguel cut through the night. They're too many, Vivian whispered. We can't hold them all off. Logan's jaw tightened. We just need to make it costly enough that they think twice about trying again. He peered around the edge of the table, then fired twice in rapid succession. There was a grunt, then the sound of a body hitting the floor. The wounded intruder was trying to crawl toward the door. Logan moved swiftly, disarming him and binding his hands with a kitchen towel. One of the Colton hands, he told Vivian after checking the man's face in the dim light. Proof, if we can get him to talk. A sudden silence fell outside, broken only by the crackling of flames from the bunkhouse. Then a voice called out Benjamin Colton's distinctive drawl. Thorne, come out and face me like a man, or we burn the whole place to the ground. Logan's expression hardened. Stay here with him, he nodded toward their prisoner. Keep him quiet. Logan, no, Vivian began, but he was already moving toward the front door. I'm coming out, Colton, he called. Just me, let's settle this. Vivian's heart hammered in her chest as she heard the front door open. Through the kitchen window, she could see Logan stepping onto the porch, his gun holstered, hands visible. Benjamin Colton stood in the yard, flanked by his brothers. The remaining attackers held positions around the property, guns trained on the house and the injured Miguel, who was being held at gunpoint by one of the Colton hands. Brave but stupid Thorne, Benjamin called. "Where's the woman?" "Inside. This is between us, Colton, has been for a while." Benjamin laughed. "This is about business. The woman's stubbornness is costing my family money and time." "Your family's greed is what's costing you," Logan countered. "There's plenty of water in this territory for those willing to work for it instead of stealing it." "Big talk from a drifter with no stake in anything." Benjamin stepped closer, his hand hovering near his gun. "That's your problem, Thorne. You drift through life, never committing, never building, just passing judgment on those of us who actually create something." "Is that what you call this?" "Creating," Logan gestured to the burning bunkhouse, to Miguel bleeding and held at gunpoint. "Looks more like destroying to me." "Enough talk." Benjamin's voice hardened. "Where's your courage now, Thorne? Draw if you're man enough." Time seemed to slow as the two men faced each other. Vivian could see the tension in Logan's stance, the readiness. Benjamin Colton was smiling, confident, his hand twitching near his holster. The shot, when it came, was deafening in the night's silence. Benjamin staggered, looking down in shock at the red stain spreading across his chest. His gun hadn't even cleared its holster. You shot me," he said, disbelief in his voice. "You gave me no choice," Logan replied, his gun still trained on the wounded man. For a moment, no one moved, then chaos erupted. Samuel Colton fired wildly, forcing Logan to dive for cover. Ethan rushed to Benjamin, who had collapsed to his knees. The hired guns began shooting at the house, shattering windows and splintering wood. Vivian ducked as bullets tore through the kitchen. Their prisoner was shouting now, trying to alert his companions. Making a split-second decision, Vivian struck him with the butt of her rifle, silencing him. Then she moved toward the front of the house, determined to help Logan. Through a broken window, she could see him pinned down behind a water trough, exchanging fire with Samuel Colton and two hired guns. Ethan was dragging the gravely wounded Benjamin toward their horses. Taking careful aim as Logan had taught her, Vivian fired at one of the gunmen, hitting him in the leg. The man howled in pain, dropping his weapon. The distraction gave Logan the opening he needed to target Samuel, who dove for cover, cursing loudly. "We need to get Benjamin to a doctor," Ethan shouted. "Samuel, come on." Samuel Colton fired a few more wild shots, then retreated toward the horses. "This isn't over, Thorne," he called. "You're dead, you hear me?" Dead, the Colton forces withdrew in disarray, carrying their wounded. As the sound of galloping horses faded, an eerie silence descended over Red Rock Ranch, broken only by the crackling of the burning bunkhouse. Logan moved immediately to Miguel, who had been shot in the arm but was otherwise unharmed. Cooper emerged from his position by the barn, bleeding from a graze to his forehead but still standing. "We need to put out that fire," Logan ordered, helping Miguel to his feet. "Cooper, check the perimeter, make sure they're all gone." Vivian joined them, dragging their prisoner from the house. "We have proof," she said, indicating the bound man, "one of their hired guns." Logan nodded grimly. "And I shot Benjamin Colton. He'll live most likely, but they won't forget that." He looked at Vivian directly. "This isn't over. It's just beginning." The rest of the night was spent battling the fire and tending to injuries. By dawn, they had managed to save most of the bunkhouse, though one section was badly damaged. Miguel's wound had been cleaned and bandaged, and their prisoner secured in the root cellar beneath the main house. As the sun rose over the red rocks, Vivian stood on the porch, surveying the damage. Bullet holes pocked the walls, windows were shattered, and the acrid smell of smoke hung in the air. But they had held their ground. They had survived the night. Logan joined her, his face grim but resolute. "We need to get to town, bring the sheriff back here with our prisoner. Make this official." "Will it matter?" Vivian asked. "You heard what the sheriff said. The Coltons have influence. Benjamin Colton tried to kill us on our own property with witnesses. Even the Coltons can't escape that completely." Logan's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Besides, shooting the eldest Colton son changes things. They'll be focused on revenge now, not just the land. You're saying it's worse. I'm saying it's different." He turned to face her fully. "Vivian, you should consider leaving, not selling, just going somewhere safe while this plays out." "I can hold the ranch with Cooper and Miguel." Vivian shook her head. "No, this is my home now. I won't be driven from it." She met his gaze steadily. And you still haven't answered my question from yesterday. Are you staying, Logan, not just for this fight, but after? For a long moment he was silent. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'm staying, for as long as you want me here. That could be a very long time, she said softly. A smile touched his lips. I'm counting on it. The ride to Sweetwater was tense, with Logan and Cooper flanking Vivian and their prisoner. Miguel had stayed behind to guard the ranch and tend to his wound. They had gone barely half the distance when they spotted a group of riders approaching from Town Sheriff Burke at the lead, flanked by a dozen armed men. That's not good, Logan muttered, reining in his horse. Cooper, be ready for anything. The sheriff's party slowed as they approached, tensions visibly high on both sides. Burke raised his hand in greeting, his expression unreadable. Thorne, Miss Greene, seems you've had some excitement. You could call it that, Logan replied cautiously. The Coltons attacked Red Rock last night, 8 men led by the Colton brothers. We have one of their hired guns as prisoner. He nodded toward the bound man slumped across Cooper's saddle. Burke sighed heavily. I know, that's why I'm here. He gestured to his posse. Benjamin Colton is dead. Died of his wounds this morning. His father has sworn out a murder warrant against you, Thorne. Logan's expression didn't change, but Vivian felt her blood run cold. It was self-defense, she said quickly. Benjamin challenged him. We all witnessed it. And I don't doubt that's true, Miss Greene, but right now I have Josiah Colton, the most powerful man in the county, demanding justice for his son's death. I have to bring Thorne in. Burke's eyes showed genuine regret. Come peacefully, Logan. I'll make sure you get a fair trial. Logan sat very still in his saddle, weighing his options. Vivian could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes whether to run, fight, or surrender. Logan, she said softly, we have witnesses, we have proof. Running will only make you look guilty. After a long moment, he nodded. All right, Burke, I'll come in, but our prisoner comes too, and I want your guarantee that Miss Greene will be protected. You have it, the sheriff promised. Some of my deputies will escort her back to town and stay at Red Rock until this is settled. As Logan surrendered his weapons and prepared to ride with the sheriff, Vivian felt a crushing weight of fear and uncertainty. Everything had changed so quickly. Yesterday they had been planning a future. Today they faced the possibility of a murder conviction. I'll be fine, Logan told her quietly as they prepared to part. The truth is on our side. The truth didn't help my uncle, Vivian replied, her voice breaking slightly. Promise me you won't do anything rash. Promise me you'll let the law work. I promise. His eyes held hers. And you promise me you'll be careful. The Coltons have lost a son, but they still want that land. Sweetwater was in an uproar when they arrived. News of Benjamin Colton's death and Logan's arrest had spread quickly. Crowds had gathered outside the jail, some calling for immediate justice, others watching in uneasy silence. Sheriff Burke managed to get Logan inside without incident, while deputies escorted Vivian to the hotel. The prisoner was taken to a separate cell where Burke promised to question him thoroughly. The circuit judge won't be here for 2 weeks, Burke explained to Vivian before leaving her at the hotel. Until then, Thorne stays in my jail. I've sent telegrams to the territorial governor explaining the situation. With your witness testimony and the prisoner's statement, we might be able to make a case for self-defense. Might, Burke sighed. Josiah Colton's influence runs deep, Miss Greene, and grief can make men do terrible things. He's lost his eldest son. He'll want someone to pay for that. The next days were a blur of legal consultations and increasing tension. Vivian split her time between visiting Logan in jail and working with a hastily hired lawyer to prepare his defense. The Coltons' hired gun eventually confessed to being paid to help teach a lesson to the occupants of Red Rock Ranch, though he insisted they hadn't intended to kill anyone, just frighten them into selling. Benjamin's funeral was a massive affair, with ranchers and townspeople from miles around attending. Josiah Colton, hollow-eyed with grief, had publicly vowed that justice would be served. His remaining sons were conspicuously absent from town, though rumors abounded that they were gathering men for some purpose. 5 days after the shooting, Vivian was returning to the hotel from the jail when Samuel Colton stepped from an alley, blocking her path. "Miss Greene," he said, his voice cold. A word. Vivian glanced around. The street was relatively busy with several people within calling distance. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Colton." "Then listen." Samuel's eyes burned with hatred. "Your man killed my brother. The law might or might not hang him for it, but either way, the Colton family doesn't forget. It was self-defense. Benjamin challenged him. Save it for the trial." Samuel stepped closer. "I'm here to offer you one last chance. Sign over Red Rock to my father, testify that Thorne killed Benjamin in cold blood, and you can walk away with enough money to start fresh anywhere." Vivian stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to perjure myself, to help you hang an innocent man? I want justice for my brother." Samuel's voice shook with emotion. "And I want what's ours, that water, that land. It should be Colton land. It never will be." Vivian drew herself up to her full height. "Logan acted in defense of himself and Red Rock. I won't lie to protect your family's greed." Samuel's face twisted with rage. "Then you've sealed his fate, and yours." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We took care of your uncle when he got in our way. Thorne's as good as dead already. How long do you think you'll last out there alone?" Before Vivian could respond, Sheriff Burke's voice cut through the tension. "Everything all right here, Miss Greene?" Samuel straightened, forcing a smile. "Just offering my condolences on her unfortunate situation, Sheriff. Good day to you both." He tipped his hat and walked away. Burke watched him go with narrowed eyes. What did he want? "He just admitted that the Coltons killed my uncle," Vivian said shakily. "And threatened to do the same to Logan and me." The sheriff sighed heavily. "Can you prove it?" "You heard him. I heard him walking away after a private conversation," Burke corrected gently. "Miss Greene, I believe you, but it's your word against a Colton's. Just like everything else," Vivian said bitterly. That night, unable to sleep, Vivian sat by her hotel window, watching the quiet street below. Samuel's threat echoed in her mind, along with his casual admission of murder. The Coltons had killed her uncle. They had fabricated the curse to drive away anyone who tried to claim Red Rock afterward. And now they had lost a son in their attempts to take what wasn't theirs. A movement in the street caught her attention, a figure slipping from shadow to shadow, heading toward the jail. Then another. Alarm bells rang in Vivian's mind. Grabbing her shawl, she hurried downstairs and out into the night, staying close to the buildings as she made her way toward the sheriff's office. As she approached, she saw more figures converging on the jail, at least 6 men moving with purpose. A lynching party. Panic seized her. They were coming for Logan. Without thinking, she ran toward the nearest building with lights still burning the saloon. Bursting through the doors, she shouted, "They're going to lynch Logan Thorne. Someone help!" The saloon fell silent, patrons staring at her in shock. For a moment, no one moved. Then Hayes, the bartender, vaulted over the bar, a shotgun in his hands. "Who's with me?" he called. Several men stood, including, to Vivian's surprise, the shopkeeper from the general store and several others who had been cordial but distant since her arrival in Sweetwater. "The Coltons have pushed too far this time," the shopkeeper said grimly, checking his revolver. "A legal trial is one thing, lynching's another." They hurried toward the jail, Vivian keeping pace despite their attempts to make her stay behind. As they approached, they saw the mob already working to break down the jail door. Sheriff Burke was nowhere in sight. Hayes fired his shotgun into the air, the blast echoing through the quiet town. "That's far enough," he shouted. "Step away from that door." The would-be lynchers turned, clearly surprised by the interruption. Ethan Colton stood at their center, his face twisted with grief and rage. "This isn't your business, Hayes," he called. "Thorne killed my brother. He needs to pay." "The law will decide that," Hayes replied, leveling his shotgun. "Now back away before this gets ugly." For a tense moment, it seemed violence was inevitable, then a new voice joined the standoff. "What in blazes is going on here?" Sheriff Burke emerged from a side street, his own weapon drawn. "Ethan Colton, you step away from that jail right now." "He killed Benjamin," Ethan's voice broke. "Father's beside himself. We can't wait for some circuit judge to maybe do the right thing." "So you thought you'd take the law into your own hands," Burke's voice was hard. "I've known your family for 20 years, Ethan. Your father built something to be proud of. Don't destroy it with murder." "It's already destroyed," Ethan shouted. "Benjamin is dead, and hanging Thorne won't bring him back," Burke said more gently. "It'll just mean another death, another family grieving." Vivian stepped forward. "Mr. Colton," she called, drawing Ethan's attention. "Your brother challenged Logan to a gunfight. He chose that path. Logan defended himself, nothing more." "Shut up." Ethan's grief was raw, his control slipping. "You don't know anything about my brother, about my family." "I know your family killed my uncle," Vivian said clearly, her voice carrying in the night air. "Samuel admitted it to me today. I know you fabricated a curse to frighten away anyone who tried to claim Red Rock after him." Murmurs ran through both groups of men. Ethan's expression faltered momentarily before hardening again. "Prove it," he spat. "I intend to," Vivian replied. "At the trial, where all the truth will come out about Benjamin's death, about my uncle's, about everything the Coltons have done to take land and water that isn't theirs." Sheriff Burke moved forward, positioning himself between the two factions. "Everyone go home. Now, Ethan, take your men and leave. This isn't the way, son." For a moment, it seemed Ethan might refuse, then his shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. "This isn't over," he said, his eyes finding Vivian. "The Colton name still means something in this territory." "Not what it used to," Hayes muttered as Ethan and his men retreated into the night. Inside the jail, they found Logan alert and ready, a makeshift weapon fashioned from a broken chair leg in his hands. His relief at seeing Vivian was palpable. "I heard the commotion," he said, reaching through the bars to take her hand. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "It's you I was worried about." She turned to Sheriff Burke. "You have to release him. The Coltons won't stop trying to get to him." Burke shook his head. "I can't just release a man charged with murder, Miss Greene. The law doesn't work that way." "Then what about the safety of your prisoner?" She pressed. "You have a duty to protect him until trial." The sheriff ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I'll post additional deputies, and after tonight I think more folks in town will be keeping an eye out. The Coltons may have influence, but a lynching crosses a line most decent people won't abide." That proved to be true in the days that followed. The attempted lynching had shifted public opinion in Sweetwater. While some still supported the Coltons out of loyalty or self-interest, many more now openly questioned their tactics. The prisoner's confession, which Burke had wisely taken in front of witnesses, further damaged the Colton reputation. A week after the attempted lynching, Josiah Colton himself came to town. Rather than leading another mob, however, he requested a private meeting with Sheriff Burke, Vivian, and the lawyer she had hired for Logan's defense. They gathered in the sheriff's office, tension thick in the air. Josiah Colton looked like a man who had aged a decade in 2 weeks. His once commanding presence was diminished by grief, his eyes hollow. "I've come to make a proposal," he said without preamble. "A way to end this without more bloodshed." Vivian's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Matthews, leaned forward. "We're listening, Mr. Colton. I will drop the murder charges against Thorne if Miss Greene agrees to sell Red Rock to me not at the previous price, but at a fair market value as determined by independent appraisers." Colton's voice was flat, emotionless. "In exchange, I want a signed statement acknowledging that my son's death, while legally self-defense, came after provocation from both sides." Vivian stared at him in disbelief. "After everything your family has done killing my uncle, fabricating a curse, attacking my ranch, you expect me to sell to you?" Josiah Colton met her gaze directly. "I expect you to be practical, Miss Greene. Even if Thorne is acquitted, this feud has no good ending. My remaining sons want vengeance. Your man killed their brother. Blood calls for blood in these parts. So I should surrender, let you profit from your crimes. You should choose life over principle," Colton replied bluntly. "I've lost my eldest son. I don't want to lose another or see more death on either side." Sheriff Burke, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "What about Vernon Greene's death, Josiah? Samuel all but confessed to Miss Greene that your family was responsible." For the first time, emotion cracked Colton's composed facade. Vernon's death was an accident. Yes, my sons confronted him about the water rights. There was a struggle. He fell. He closed his eyes briefly. I never ordered his death, never would have, but what's done is done. And the curse. Vivian pressed. The poisoned cattle, the fires, tactics to persuade, not to kill. Colton's voice hardened. Until that night at your ranch, we never intended lethal harm. Benjamin's death changed everything. Matthews leaned toward Vivian. May I suggest we discuss this privately before responding? They moved to a corner of the room, speaking in hushed tones. It's not a bad offer, Matthews admitted. Thorne walks free, you get fair compensation for the land, and this blood feud ends before anyone else dies. And the Coltons get away with murder, Vivian countered. Murder would be hard to prove at this point. Vernon Greene's death happened over a year ago with no witnesses except the Coltons themselves. Matthews sighed. Miss Greene, I understand your principles, but consider the practical reality. Even if Thorne is acquitted, can you live at Red Rock knowing the Coltons' grudge will never die? Can you build a life there under that shadow? Vivian glanced toward the jail cells where Logan was being held. I need to speak with Mr. Thorne before deciding. Burke nodded. I'll allow it. Logan listened in silence as Vivian explained the offer, his expression unreadable. What do you think? She finally asked. I think it's your decision, he replied. Red Rock is your land. That's not an answer, Logan. She reached through the bars to take his hand. We both know this affects you as much as me. If we stay, the feud continues. If we sell, we can go anywhere, start fresh. Together, he asked quietly. Together. Vivian tightened her grip on his hand. I've lost one home already. I can build another, but I won't lose you. Logan was silent for a long moment. Your uncle loved that land, he saw something in it worth fighting for, and he died for it. Yes, Logan's eyes met hers, but he died for something he believed in, something real. He squeezed her hand. What do you believe in, Vivian? She thought about Red Rock, about the beautiful spring bubbling from crimson stone, about the vast skies and rolling land, about the home her uncle had built with his own hands. And she thought about the cost of holding on to it, the constant fear, the violence, the shadow of the Coltons' vengeance hanging over them. I believe in building something that lasts, she said finally, and I don't think we can do that at Red Rock, not now. Logan nodded slowly. Then we sell. And we start again somewhere new. When they returned to the sheriff's office, Josiah Colton was waiting with visible impatience. I've considered your offer, Mr. Colton, Vivian said, her voice steady. I will sell Red Rock Ranch at a fair market value with one condition. Name it. I want a written confession regarding my uncle's death, signed by you and your sons. Not for the law, she added as Colton began to object, but for me. I want the truth acknowledged, even if there's no legal punishment. Colton hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. Though I maintain it was an accident, not murder. The document will reflect your version of events, Vivian conceded, but it will be signed and witnessed. Then we have an agreement. Colton extended his hand, which Vivian shook after a moment's hesitation. I'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately. Thorne can be released as soon as it's signed. By sunset, the legal documents had been prepared, signed, and witnessed. Logan walked out of the jail a free man, the murder charges dropped. Vivian had signed over Red Rock Ranch for $20,000, a sum even Matthews admitted was more than fair. The confession from the Coltons regarding Vernon Greene's death was carefully worded, admitting to a confrontation that led to an accidental fatal fall, but denying premeditated murder. It wasn't complete justice, but it was an acknowledgement of truth that had been buried for too long. As they stood outside the sheriff's office, the weight of the day's events settling around them, Logan took Vivian's hand. Any regrets? He asked softly. She looked toward the distant hills, where the setting sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Some, I would have liked to make my uncle's dream succeed, to prove the Coltons couldn't drive us away. They didn't, Logan pointed out. You chose to leave on your terms, with the truth acknowledged and your head held high. There's power in that choice. Vivian nodded slowly. And now we choose again. Where do we go from here? Logan's eyes held hers. I hear Montana Territory is beautiful. Good land, fewer Coltons. A smile touched her lips. Montana it is, then. They spent one final night at Red Rock Ranch, accompanied by Cooper and Miguel, who had remained loyal throughout the ordeal. As they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky, Vivian felt a curious mixture of sadness and hope. "They'll get their water," she said, gesturing toward the distant spring. "Was it worth all this death and pain?" "To them, yes," Logan replied. "Men like Josiah Colton measure their worth by what they own, what they control. The land, the water, it's all part of the empire he's building." "And what do we measure our worth by?" Vivian asked. Logan's arms slipped around her shoulders, drawing her closer. "By what we build together. By the lives we touch, by the love we share." He paused, his voice softening. "I've been running from commitment for 5 years, Vivian. I'm done running now." She leaned into his embrace. "Good, because I've become quite attached to having you around, Mr. Thorne." 2 weeks later, they boarded a northbound train, their few possessions packed and their future ahead of them. Cooper had elected to accompany them to Montana, while Miguel had found work with a ranch near Cheyenne. As the train pulled away from Sweetwater, Vivian gazed out the window at the receding landscape. She would miss Wyoming's wild beauty, the red rocks and vast skies that had, however briefly, been her home. But the $20,000 in the bank draft tucked safely in her valise represented a new beginning land of their own in a place where the Colton name held no power. Logan sat beside her, his hand covering hers. "Second thoughts?" "No," Vivian said truthfully, "just remembering." "The land will still be there," he said softly. "The spring will still flow. Whether it's called Red Rock Ranch or Colton property doesn't change what it is." "True." She turned from the window to face him. "Just as what we are doesn't change with our location." "And what are we, Miss Greene?" She smiled. "Survivors, builders, partners." Her hand tightened on his. "Home." Logan's expression softened, years of wariness and grief giving way to something new hope. "When we were at Red Rock, Sheriff Burke said something that stuck with me. He said they call you Cursed Thorne." "What did you say?" Vivian asked. A smile touched his lips. "I told him if being cursed meant finding you, then I'd be proud to share your curse for the rest of my days." Vivian leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a gentle kiss. "Then consider us cursed together, Mr. Thorne, forever." Montana welcomed them with open arms and open land. Using the proceeds from the sale of Red Rock, they purchased a sprawling property in the Gallatin Valley, rich grassland bordered by mountains, with a clear river running through it. They named it New Horizon Ranch, a symbol of their fresh start. They married in a small ceremony in the nearest town, with Cooper and a few new neighbors as witnesses. Vivian wore a simple blue dress rather than traditional white, a choice that raised eyebrows but suited her independent spirit. Logan, in a new suit that still couldn't quite hide the rugged cowboy beneath, looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. Their vows were straightforward but heartfelt. "I promise to build with you," Logan said, his voice steady as he placed the ring on her finger. "To stand beside you through whatever comes, to make a home that lasts." "I promise to be your partner in all things," Vivian replied, her eyes shining, "to face each challenge together, to love you completely as long as we both shall live." The years that followed proved those vows were not empty words. They built New Horizon into one of the most successful ranches in the valley, raising cattle and horses that became known throughout the territory for their quality. Logan's experience and Vivian's head for business made them formidable partners. Cooper stayed on as their foreman, eventually marrying a local widow and building a small home of his own on the property. Their family grew with the birth of their son, Vernon, named for the uncle Vivian had never truly known but whose legacy had brought them together. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, Eliza, named for Logan's late wife in a gesture of healing that acknowledged the past while embracing the future. News from Sweetwater reached them occasionally. The Colton empire continued to grow, though rumors suggested Josiah's health was failing and his remaining sons struggled to maintain his iron grip on the county. Red Rock Ranch had been absorbed into the Colton holdings, its name changed, its history slowly fading from local memory. But on New Horizon Ranch, The story was told and retold how a determined woman from the east had claimed a cursed property, how a drifting cowboy had found a reason to stay, how love had blossomed in the midst of danger and conflict. On the 10th anniversary of their arrival in Montana, Logan and Vivian stood on a hill overlooking their property, the sturdy main house, the well-built barns and corrals, the lush pastures where cattle and horses grazed. Their children played in the yard below, their laughter carrying on the summer breeze. Was it worth it? Logan asked, his arm around her waist. Giving up Red Rock to build this? Vivian leaned into his embrace. We didn't give up anything that mattered. The land, the buildings, those were just places. What we brought with us was the courage to stand our ground when it counted, the wisdom to know when to change course, and the love to build something that would last. Logan nodded, his gaze taking in their home, their land, their life together. From cursed to blessed, he murmured. Who would have thought? I would, Vivian said, turning in his arms to face him. Her hand traced the scar on his cheek, now faded with time but still a reminder of the path that had brought them together. From the moment you agreed to stay and fight with me at Red Rock, I knew we could build something beautiful together. Even when the odds were against us, he asked, a smile playing at his lips, especially then. She stretched up to kiss him, the gesture as natural as breathing after a decade together. The best things always come from the hardest struggles. As they walked hand in hand down the hill toward their home and waiting children, Vivian reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. A telegram about an inheritance, a supposedly cursed ranch, a wounded drifter who had found his way back to life and love. Vernon ran to meet them, his 7-year-old legs pumping with energy, his father's eyes bright in his mother's face. Eliza followed more sedately, at 5 already showing signs of the quiet determination that characterized both her parents. Papa, Mama, Cooper says the new foal is ready to be named, Vernon called excitedly. Can we name her together, please? Logan scooped his son up in a smooth motion. What do you think, Mrs. Thorne? Shall we name her together? Vivian took Eliza's hand, completing their family circle. Together, she agreed, always together. And as they walked toward the barn, surrounded by the life they had built from the ashes of loss and conflict, Vivian knew with absolute certainty that sharing Logan's curse had been the greatest blessing of her life.